Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Unmuted. Happy to be back. And just so everyone knows, I am also back on Spotify again, recording these videos. We were able to find a way to get these videos on there, and very happy to do so. Today, I wanted to talk about something that I think is hitting very close to home personally, with a family member of mine going into nursing and really discussing some of these issues. And I thought, I think it's time to get, it's something I've talked about a few times on this channel is healthcare. And I do want to dive back into that with a greater, actually, now understanding of that healthcare and what we need to do and what's not being done. It's problem, and it really started with an article I saw that was posted by the province. I tried to find it to read, but now I think they may have taken it down or something. But the province of British Columbia was almost bragging how well they've been doing with nursing and nurses in British Columbia. And right before, about I'd say a month before that post came out from the province, British Columbia, maybe it was the NDP bragging or something like that. But a month before, they were just saying how we're in a nursing crisis. Then a month later, they go and say, well, now we've done a good job. But yet, have they? Have we done a good job on healthcare? I understand there are people out there who won't agree with me on this. And that's probably to that, I'd say, yeah, I don't think you've ever relied on Canadian healthcare as much as maybe, with a terminal illness or a rare disease, but, like maybe I've experienced. But when you truly have to rely, and I don't mean a broken bone or something on that caliber, or, an infection, or you need to go on for, maybe a more simpler surgery. But if you actually need some basic stuff, and I wish I got it, I couldn't find a way to grab it. But Member of Parliament Todd Doherty released a video about something very similar to what I'm going to be talking about. Is how hard it is to even just get basic surgery, and let alone this province, but this entire country. People put on massive wait lists. And it's crazy because, especially here in British Columbia, we expect our healthcare to be sublime and absolutely to its highest standard. But yet it feels like it's not. And why is that? Well, I do think it's gotten to the point of carelessness. You see what happens when these more socialist parties take over. They say, yes, everything's great, but they spend so much on administration, on policy and advertising and bureaucracy, that there's not enough money for actual putting into hospitals and equipment. The Fraser Institute, I think in either 18 or 2019, did a study. Canada is the second highest paying sector in the world. We are the second highest people put our money into the healthcare system in the world. Yet we don't even come top 10 in almost anything. I think administration would come top 10. Even then, we don't even come number one, I don't believe, unless that's changed in the past year. But in 2019, we put down the most money. This was 4 years ago, and our taxes have only gone up, and our services and these things have only gone up. So what does that really mean? I think it means we are putting this money, but where's it going? Well, I can tell you where it's going. It's going into administration. It's going into advertising. It's going into, for example, Dr. Tam went on a stage, and as the health authority with Health Canada. And I thought, she'd go up there saying, oh, we need to talk about the health crisis. We need to talk about the shortage of nurses. We need to talk about. No, she used her platform as the head of Health Canada to talk about how we need to get rid of capitalism and individuality. We're paying her to, we the people, not Mr. Trudeau, not the government. We are paying her to deal with health issues. Do you know why we have such a mess up in this country? Because our top doctor, the head of Health Canada, would rather talk about how we need to get rid of capitalism and individuality to stop climate change. What does that have to do with Health Canada? What does that have to do with the health of Canadians? The declining health of Canadians, may I add. Canada is getting worse on healthcare. We've done nothing. Well, the NDP across the country love to pat themselves on the back thinking, look at the system we created. but they don't want to take credit for how terribly it's gone, even though, but they want to move on to pharmacare and dental care fully on the same level as our healthcare. But we haven't even perfected healthcare yet. And it's not like it can't be done. Scandinavia and most of European countries have mastered healthcare, have much better care, and even pay less into the system than we do. The system, you have all these politicians and premiers and mayors and city council saying, we need more money. No, you don't. Well, you need to put money in the right place. The problem is the provinces get a hold of this money and they throw this money into administration. They throw it into their bureaucrats and the bureaucracies. That's who's getting paid. Not the doctors, not the nurses, not the hospitals, not more equipment, anything like that. It's all in decline. Let's go back to the nursing issue, by the way. So what I want to get into is the provinces bragging about how well they've done with nursing, and they brought in a bunch of foreign nurses. But have they done well on nursing? If you have to bring in a bunch of nurses from around the world, and I think even the province has even stated there's not enough people want to be nurses here, which is just absolute false. It's a lie. It's an outright lie, is what it is. BCIT, one school. This is one school has over 10,000 people on the wait list for the nursing program alone. 10,000, over 10,000. I even think I heard someone say 80,000, but that could be a little bit much. But I know for sure it's over 10,000. 10,000 people want to be nurses in British Columbia. 10,000. You can't sit here and say that, and this is what the federal government, the provincial government say, no one wants to be nurses. Well, that's absolute bull crap. People do want to become nurses, but our system, our education system, puts so much strain and stress on people going through these rigorous processings on school that no one wants to go through the trouble of going through it anymore. We have the same system in Health Canada. Companies don't want to come here for our trials because our process through Health Canada is so demanding that companies don't want to work with Canada anymore. I've even heard some drug companies for an ALS product left the process in the middle of the process because of how rigorous and ridiculous the requirements were to stay on board. That's our healthcare system. They would rather go to the United States. They'd rather go to like South Korea, Europe, Japan, because these are countries that actually have innovative economies. Canada's economy is not that of an innovative economy. We're a natural resource economy. That's just the facts. It's what we have. And they have, and that's what these countries are. What drives me nuts, though, is that we say these things like we don't have enough nurses because not enough people want to be nurses, which is a blatant lie. But then the government, my sister's going into nursing, and she told me all about this, and so did my mom, about how, guess what? They're now upping the requirements to get your RNA. I think it used to be 8 months. Now they're doing it to 2 years. We have said we have a shortage of nurses. We have a nursing crisis, I believe the province of British Columbia State. I didn't even think the federal government said the same thing. So what are we going to do? We're going to make it harder to become a nurse. Not that we should ease the processings, but I think nursing is not easy to get into, first of all. It's not easy to do. It's not easy to pass. If you're doing well and getting through your kind of beginning stuff easily, why not fast track the people who are doing well and know what they're doing, and the people who aren't, we should hold back. Not saying we should necessarily say you can't try again, or they just make them wait longer. Get the people who are successful, know what they're doing, getting them in the field quicker. I'm not saying we need to cut schooling or anything like that for nursing. It's very important. People should know what they're doing. For example, it's easy if someone doesn't know what they're doing in the field to totally mess that field up. But we are in a crisis. We're in a great depression of healthcare right now in Canada, and it's of our own making. And I think the government has failed to properly take care of the health of Canadians. Well, most provincial governments. I can't speak for, say, Alberta or Quebec. I don't know what their systems are. I think Alberta has more of a private system, but I've heard some of the best nurses in the country are from Alberta. And that actually makes testament on how maybe a private system, a duality system like Australia has a private healthcare and public healthcare. Maybe we need a dual system of private and public. The problem is, where does this money go? We have as I said, according to the Fraser Institute study, we are the second highest paying in a country that pays into their healthcare system. That's where a lot of our money's going. But where are the results of it? It's not in our hospitals. If you go to places like Surrey Center, it's an absolute travesty, disgusting place, underkept, old building. They just built a new hospital in Surrey, but they hadn't even updated the one in Surrey Memorial. And that, I can attest to the pictures, the horrific pictures I've seen. But our hospitals, at least in British Columbia here, are a third world condition. If you don't believe me, in my job, I work with people. A woman whose father died in a hospital. He wasn't in a hospital room. He was in a children's playroom in a hospital, and it was so cold that he literally had to wear a winter jacket over top of his robe thing. Like, he had to wear so many layers because it was so freezing cold. And this is, I think, in Williams Lake or Quesnel, somewhere in that region in the Caribou. We are supposed to be a first world country. Supposed to be. It is if you're in Vancouver, even not even then, really. But if you're in the big cities, you get a little bit better health care. But where's the equality of health care? If you're in the big city, you get more health care. Why should people have to fly down to Vancouver to get some basic surgeries done? When that sometimes moving people like that can actually be the cause of death of certain people for certain reasons. I understand you can't have every fancy little thing, but why not? We put so much money into our system, we absolutely could afford to do that. And I'm not saying we need to cut healthcare funding, but we need to cut funding into administration. One of the highest employers in the town I live in, Prince George, is probably Northern Health, which I don't know what they do because they reject doctors out the wazoo of starting practices here. I knew a doctor, an Irish couple that moved to Canada, wanted to start a practice here. They want to do it in Prince George. Or Northern Health told them, no, you got to go to, I think it was Kelowna or Kamloops, somewhere in the Okanagan. And so the whole reason for these health authorities, the reason why British comes is so everything wouldn't go to Vancouver or the Okanagan. Well, it ends up everything goes to Vancouver and the Okanagan anyways. It doesn't matter if they have separate authorities. We don't need 50,000 buildings for health authorities. We don't need a Health Canada office in every city in the country. We don't need a Northern Health office in every part of the North and in Victoria, everywhere else. We don't need this much administration. I don't know why there's this much administration. I actually don't know what Northern Health and all these health workers do, because and the reason why I think most of them don't do anything, and I'm sure that's going to rub some people the wrong way, but hear me out on why I do believe they don't do anything. The processing takes years for Health Canada to approve drug processes. So if we have some of the highest number of administration people, why isn't that getting done faster? We know they got paid more after this whole strike came out. So I do expect things to be getting done faster now that they're getting more money. They better be, or else what the heck are we paying them for? More money. I think it's going to cost taxpayers over $1 billion a year for this raise. So, I mean, and I have nothing against all government workers. I know many who work very hard. My criticism is only for Northern Health. Not just Northern Health. Health Canada and all the health authorities across the province, across the country. Sorry. And so, what do they do? Because things have been taking longer. Of course, we blame the pandemic because things took even longer because we had to fast track. But you know what annoys me, and what the real kicker is for me, is we could fast track a vaccine that was hardly tested. Now, I want to say this: I'm not against the vaccine and people who took the vaccine. I know it's a for some reason, divisive issue. I think that more of the divisive issue is not if you believe in the vaccine; it was that you were essentially forced to take it. Which I have my own opinions on that. But for right now, I want to say I'm not against necessarily the vaccine. Vaccines in history have tended to be a positive thing and have worked. Of course, anyone who claims the vaccine is going to end COVID didn't know what they're talking about. I don't think any medical authority ever claimed that a vaccine is going to, prove me wrong with a government authority. I don't remember ever a government authority saying this is going to end the vaccine by if you take it. Vaccines work as it. works to break it down so it no longer becomes a problem. I don't think anyone said COVID's going to be cured. It just works to a way. It came the same way with the Black Plague and the Spanish flu. Vaccines were used to not end these, but very much take them down to a level, and eventually they were gone because the vaccines build people's immunity to them, and that's how these things usually work. That's just me explaining the history of vaccines. The problem I had with these vaccines were they were not properly tested, and you can't say that they were because they were fast tracked so quickly. What pisses me off about that, COVID has a 1% death rate. Let's say liberally 2%. Okay, just being liberal, but I think it was like 1.5, 1.8. So let's just round it up and let's go to the nearest variable and say 2. Let's say it had a 2% death rate globally, which again, this disease very much mirrored the Spanish flu. It was very similar. And so, but let's say 2%. Just say, I know people are gonna say, it wasn't 2%, it was 1%, whatever. Let's go on the high end and say, let's go very liberal on the numbers, say 2%. This got fast track a disease that kills 2% of the population. That has a 2% death rate. That has a 2% chance of death rate. You have a 2% chance of dying from COVID if you get it. Now, I actually think it's less than 1% now how the current COVID's working, because it's now turning into more of a flu than an actual than what it was when it first came around. So that's a 2% chance you're going to die. Again, that's the liberal numbers. Now let's look at something like ALS. 100% chance you're going to die. So COVID vaccines, we passed in not even months. I think it was weeks once they became available to Canada. We are how long does it take? Like probably years for ALS vaccines or ALS treatments, not vaccines. Sorry, I wish we had a ALS vaccine, but we don't yet. But ALS has let me be clear about this with the ALS side. There are treatments already working around the world, and when these companies want to come here, like what we I think Canadians need is a system where if it's approved in countries that are far better versed in healthcare than we are, we should just automatically accept it. Like for example, Israel, which is like the top health health provider in the world. I don't care what your stance on Israel is, you cannot deny we wouldn't have antibiotics without Israel. So I don't really care what your stance on Israel politically is, but you cannot deny they are the best healthcare providers in the world. They are the top innovators on healthcare globally. We would not have antibiotics without the Israelis. So, I mean, put aside the politics side of things, Israel absolutely is, I think, number one on healthcare in the world. I don't think anyone matches them. I think, Europeans come close, and so does areas like South Korea and Japan. I think also come really close. But we can't deny Israel, I think, is one of the best healthcare providers, healthcare innovators, I should say, actually, in the world. So if that's the case, why can't we have a system where if Japan, Israel, and Germany already have this, and even the US has this, why can't we just fast track and approve it? Look through their reviews and their studies really quick, and if it came off to a great degree, that should only take a few weeks for us to process. Instead, we say, no, we need to do our own review. We need to look at it through our experts. The same experts who say we should fight climate change by getting rid of capitalism and individuality. Those kind of experts, those are the people we should be looking to. Because right now, I think Dr. Tam is a bureaucrat. She's not, I don't even think she's actually talking health. She's talking politics, which should not be something the head of Health Canada should be talking about. We shouldn't have a bureaucrat in Health Canada. Health Canada should not have a bureaucracy. It should be a government organization that is independent of Parliament, that works on bringing in things like to vaccines, working in treatments, and should be actively seeking these things. But no, instead our health authority rather talks about how we need to end climate change by fighting capitalism and individuality. That's what they'd rather talk about, instead of actually, let's bring in things to actually help people and make our healthcare better. Now, screw that. We're going to talk about the environment and how capitalism ruins everything. That is what our healthcare provide. That's what our top doctors and Health Canada talks about. And yet we're surprised that our healthcare is in such decline when we have bureaucrats in making our healthcare decisions instead of practicing doctors who hold the sign of ethics on what we need to do for healthcare instead. That's why we have this, what I'm calling a Great Depression with Canadian healthcare. It's absolutely ludicrous what's happening right now. And the only way I think we can truly take this on is if we start demanding of our health authority to actually provide health care. They're not providing healthcare. They're providing administration, more administration, bureaucracy, politics. If anything, that should not be political. It should be our health system, our tax system, and our electoral system, which thankfully the tax and the electoral system are pretty non-political. And I know for the electoral system piece, well, elections are politics, but how we run our elections should not be based on politics. And for Canada, I think we do actually master that pretty well. Our elections are very independent, unlike the United States, who there's an elections committee that actually decides on the outcomes of elections, which I think is totally not okay and totally has a conflict, totally describes the definition of conflict of interest is that. But I think we need to start demanding better. We need to start demanding that our government puts forward the people who want to be nurses here in this country. There are Canadians who want to be nurses. We have probably, I would say, hundreds of thousands of people on wait lists across country wanting to become nurses. But we don't like why aren't we building nursing schools specifically for people who want to be nursing? Open up university spaces for other things and build a building that can hold 10,000 nurses and plump them in a school, have a bunch of schools across country, across Canada, across the world that specifically deal with nursing. We have medical schools, we have law schools. Why don't we have nursing schools? I think there's even schools for dentistry. There's schools for everything but it seems like nursing. But why don't we have that? Why don't we build a school or build something where there's an actual nursing, school where all its job is nursing school and build these departments to match the requirements of people on the wait list. Our government doesn't seem to care. They just said, "Oh, we'll just bring in a bunch of people who aren't familiar with the Canadian system and how our healthcare system works." But which we still have to retrain them. So what do? Is we bring in these people, we shove certain people out of the schools because we have to bring in all these foreign nurses to train for a few years. In the end, we're still waiting for, no matter if you bring them internationally or if you take them on here at home, we're still having to go through a schooling process. And now the government is, in British Columbia at least, has upped the requirements for those people to become nurses, meaning we're going to have to wait even longer for people to have more nurses. As I said, there's over 10,000 people on the wait list for BCIT. One school. Just think the wait list at UNBC, McGill, Simon Fraser University, these big universities, and not to say that BCIT is a big technical college, but think about all the other colleges and universities across Canada. What are their wait lists like for nursing? And I actually think the private schools are actually going to start. Honestly, if I was a hospital, I'd be looking to the private schools because they don't go through the political BS of this equity chart of we need to hire this certain amount of group. We need to check off these boxes of people we bring. Private universities, it's about money. Who's going to pay us? And frankly, if I was someone going into a nurse program, if I chose going, I'd go to a private school. Sure, you pay more, but you're gonna get, you're getting in if you have the money. Honestly, like I almost talked my sister into going to a private university because of that. I know she could. The only reason is I know she couldn't afford it, which is a shame because right now I think those are going to produce the best nurses right now because they're going to bring in a ton and they're going to make room. That's the thing. Private universities will make room for those nurses because they're paying for it. They're paying for this education. And I actually, if I was a hospital, I'd actually probably pay from these private universities. I know they're going to bring out people because they're not pulling it off of a checklist of what group that we pull from, but they're pulling from people who pay for it. And that's actually sometimes, I don't believe everything. I don't fully believe, I'm not a full libertarian. I don't think everything needs to be privatized. But I do think having a duality system of private and public does have its benefits. And I do think, I think it's Australia that does this. Is Australia, New Zealand, one or the other, has a private and public healthcare system. You have the private and you have the public. You get to choose. But everyone, and what this does actually could open up our public healthcare and less that, because people can afford private, can go to the private doctors, and opens up our public system, or sorry, opens up the public system a bit more. One thing that I can really will remove strain, if we have private hospital, build private hospitals, and people can afford to go those, that would actually open up more space for doctors and nurses on the public side. And I think you really would have a more open and transparent system like that. And not only you'd have a more available system to people. It's something to look into for sure, and something we should actually be talking about, because I think Alberta does that, and they seem to actually be doing pretty well on healthcare from last I can see. But I come back to this, and Canadian healthcare sucks. There's no sugarcoating it. We don't have a good system. We just don't. There are countries who spend way about half of what we do in healthcare. And they have way better systems. They have much more nurses, much more doctors. They have much more advanced equipment. I mean, go to South Korea, Japan, Germany, England, Australia. Their healthcare system is way better than ours. I think we have one of the worst healthcare systems in the world. Yes, the world. And why I say the world is because we try and sell our healthcare off as a first world healthcare system, but it's not. We lie to ourselves. We lie to the people, saying our healthcare system works. It doesn't. It does not work. And they're talking to the people who, yes, it works if you have a broken arm. Yes, it works but how long are you gonna wait, or a waiting room? Honestly, you're in the emergency room waiting with a broken bone, sitting there for finally see a doctor or a nurse to come just take a look at you, for crying out loud. Like, I've heard stories from people who went to a hospital. They didn't even x-ray him. You walking around with a broken, I think it was something broken in his body for 2 days. He had to come back and like, oh yeah, this was broken. Is that not an example of our healthcare system being absolute crap? Like, we sit here as Canadians criticizing the Americans because they pay. At least we know they're getting pretty decent healthcare when you're paying for it, because you're paying for it. That's the difference, right? It's sitting on our taxes, and in Canada here, and we pay through it for our taxes, which I don't think is a terrible idea. I think everyone should have access to healthcare. I do believe that the health and people have the right to have a right to life, and I think healthcare is a very vital system in that. And I think we do need, everyone should have access to healthcare if you require it. I'm not saying we need to go to the American system, but I will say so. The American system is, it's a system where you will be taken care of, because nurses and doctors in those hospitals need you to come back so they get paid. That's why things are so expensive, right? Medical stuff is not cheap. And it says a testament to Canada is, we know it's not cheap. We're the almost highest paying country in the world, but we have the worst equipment. We have the least amount of nurses and doctors in the Western world, it seems. Why? Because we're not putting it towards healthcare. We're putting it to people like Dr. Tam, giving them raises, and giving the top people at Health Canada and Northern Health or Fraser Health, the health authorities across the country. The provinces are putting all their monies to bureaucrats. That's why our system isn't being as good as it is. We're not actually putting the money where the money needs to go. And that's a problem, and one we need to continue to fix. But that's why we need to talk about it here. We make the noise, and hopefully things get changed. And of course, we come up with the solutions. That's enough for me today. But we are seriously in a healthcare depression right now, it seems. And the best way we need to fight it is our health authorities. So let us continue to keep on with the fight, bring awareness to these issues, and hopefully people will hear. Keep following, keep liking, keep subscribing to YouTube, Spotify, and Facebook, and keep my videos up on there. And make sure to share them around, comment on what we've been saying, and let's unmute the issues together. Thanks, everyone.